Welcome to I've never read Discworld. I'm Andy Luke, and I haven't read very much Discworld.
I'm PJ Hart. I've read much of Discworld, including this one, which is Andy.
It is Eric, and it's book 9, I believe,
Indeed.
published by Victor Galans Corgi in 1990 as an illustrated version with the Josh Kirby. And I've been reading that version.
That is a large book.
It is big bumper library fun.
So, for those of you who aren't watching our low resolution video offering, like, how big is that? Is that like a trade paperback? Like, what?
It's at least A4. I happen to have some A4 here.
Oh, here we go. Visual comparison occurring as
It's
we speak.
it's just a little smaller than A4. Yeah,
Interesting. Cool. Okay.
tech heads out there.
Indeed. The reason I ask, Andy, as you've just heard, has read the illustrated version. On both readings, first reading and second reading, I read the unillustrated version. So again, like this time round, I read it on Kindle, as I almost always do. First time round, the details are lost to history, unfortunately. So that's interesting. Yeah, like it's still like when you're holding it in your hand, it doesn't look like an insubstantial short story. It looks like a sizable tome.
Yeah, I can imagine it fitting in with the Hergé Tintin volumes, the Asterix books.
Yeah. Okay, I get that. Yeah.
Um, let's go into the back cover synopsis.
Go for it.
You've heard of Faust? This is Eric. There's a difference. Eric is 14, lives on the famed and magical Discworld, and is the first ever demonology hacker. Fortunately, he doesn't succeed in raising any devils, but he does raise Rincewind, the most incompetent wizard in the universe, and the luggage, the world's most dangerous travel accessory. When Eric turns him loose on an unprotected world, the idea is that Rincewind will grant him this three rather adolescent wishes. You know, the usual three. Live forever, rule the world, meet the most beautiful woman who ever lived. Simple, really. Getting marooned at the dawn of time, changing the future and meeting history's most embarrassing god is only the start. Creating life on the Discworld is a mere detail, because Rincewind ends up going through hell. Literally. It'll never be the same again.
That is a lot of blurb, considering how kind of teasery some of the other ones have been, you know?
There's a lot of the novel covered in that
Yeah,
blurb.
yeah, yeah. Thinking about the guards one, that gave very little away. It was just like, hey, dragons, Discworld, go for it, you know? Which is, I mean, that's all you need, as far as I'm concerned, as you know.
I had never read Faust. I guess my entry point would have been Christian mythology. When I was growing up in the 80s, we were subjected to a lot of American preachers encouraging us to play music backwards. That Satan was out to get us because he loved us. He loved our souls. Satan did,
Of course.
and
Those
he
delicious
wanted
souls.
to like use them for, I don't know, loyalty points or diddling or something.
I mean, it can only be one of those two things, nothing else, absolutely. Um, Interesting. Yeah, so for me, I guess, like, I vaguely remember like Marlowe would have been kind of referenced in English literature classes, about Shakespeare, but we didn't have to read him. So we never had to read Faust, but we would have been like vaguely aware of its existence in that context, in the Christopher Marlowe context. As that relates to Shakespeare in those like really dry, boring English literature lessons of yesteryear. So yeah, and I would have interestingly, like I would have read this book around that time for the first time. So like it always has this weird connection to my like I guess that's key stage three level education. The fact that there are all these references to like yeah, English literature and classics and stuff like that. So it's always going to remind me of school in a weird way. But we'll get to that a little bit. I'm interested to hear your first impressions.
Um, so I remember seeing Eric about a lot, and I've seen Mort about a lot, and those are what I think of as the iconic Discworld books. I guess it's more about design than anything else.
Interesting.
There is a big one. I'll just put it out now. Jingo. I remember
Yeah.
being very aware of Jingo because the advertising stand was by Jingo.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh yeah, that's good. See what
so
they did
there's
there.
certain Discworld books I remember coming quite clearly, and Eric was one of them. And I had certain high expectations going with Pratchett's name. And honestly, the start's brilliant, the ending's brilliant, the middle kind of hangs about a bit. Um, let's see, what have I written on my little man's data pad?
The
Pretty
notes have
much
got a lot
just
more
that.
professional. Oh, sorry. Then I said the notes have got more professional, and then I talked over them, which was extremely unprofessional. So sorry. Go ahead.
I thought the midsection of the book was telling stories that we kind of seen before already. Particularly in The Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic. But I do like a good novella. I like a shorter read. I think that's the way things are going to be heading. The whole George R. R. Martin, Harry Potter omnibuses are behind us. If you think about classical literature, we didn't have those big stonking doorstep-sized books. Um, you only really got those in more recently, and like when you're coming to collected works of authors. And I think with internet reading, I think we're headed for the novellas. So I do like a novella. This
Yeah,
one
I'm all
felt
for
a
that.
bit like a long short story.
Yeah.
And as I said, I read Josh Kirby, and Josh Kirby absolutely effing knocks it out of the park here. He is on absolute top form. Yeah, I think he outshines Pratchett in this edition.
Interesting. That is interesting.
Which
Okay.
is yeah, and I'm still green, but I'm making out with a bit of credit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made some really good points there. It was.
It's just I forget the comparison. I mean, he is just doing some incredible work with his double page spreads, just adding whole new dimensions onto this world that is being built in sections.
I was perusing the artwork just for the first time there before we came on, actually. Interestingly, I haven't read the book twice, but never really looked at the illustrations. And getting to see Kirby's work flat, I guess, as opposed to being wrapped around a book, because like it's so dense that the illustrations are the cover illustrations, I mean, are so dense that like you're always going to miss things when you're like looking at it in a 3D object. There's like details hidden on the spine and stuff like that. So yeah, to see those big double page spreads was really cool. And I say that like as you know, and as the regular listeners know, like I'm fairly ambivalent when it comes to the Kirby illustrations, to be honest. But I think this was an interesting experiment, certainly, in terms of doing like an illustrated Discworld book in the novella length.
And I totally agree. The Kirby's artwork is limited and inhibited by banners, by spines, and when you see it, just because I have this in front of me,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
um,
for the video.
when that's laid out like that, that's the proper size. It should be like it shouldn't be squashed away down to this tiny wee thing. And I think that's part of the issue with Josh Kirby is that he's crammed. And this was a guy, we're going to be talking a bit more about him in a minute with a wee bit of a deep dive. Or actually, let's just go into it now. Yeah. So he
Go for it.
used oils, he used acrylics, um, he was watercolors, gouache. So he liked to like layer stuff on top of one another. He liked oils so it dried quickly, it could be manipulated and layered. Um, and he was very different from your standard science fiction fantasy cover artist. He used that sort of airbrushed look because Kirby came for this sort of old masters classical thing. I mean, he counts his three main influences as Hieronymus Bosch, is famous for his fantastic imagery and religious concepts and narratives. Um, Pieter Bruegel, whose religious and mythological depictions expand perspective of reality again. So we're seeing reality, religion, and myth and story. And then Frank Brongin, who's an avant-garde artist, notable for bodily colored murals. And I mean, yeah, I
As an
wouldn't
art
mind seeing it.
Philistine, I'm just like really glad that I recognized at least one of those three artists. I was like, yes, that's as long as I can recognize
Who
one,
did
I'm
you
still
get?
in the conversation. Bosh.
Bosch, yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
After that, I was lost. But yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing a few Josh Kirby murals around Belfast, to be
Oh,
honest.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, just a wee bit of background. Born 27th of November, 1928, as Ronald William Kirby. Raised in Liverpool, found science fiction early in the Modern World magazine, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers. He enrolled. Do you want to know what age he was when he enrolled in the Liverpool City School of Art?
Shall I guess?
No,
25.
14.
What?
They
I
had
thought
a
it must be
junior
late. It was early.
school. Yeah, right. They
Wow.
had a junior school. He then 14 and he went to the senior school. So he was there until he was 20. He did the senior school on a scholarship of £45 a year. He was asked to paint the Lord Mayor of Liverpool in 1950, but he did the commission and then decided it wasn't really for him, portraiture. So he started to get into movie posters. Return of the Jedi, Beastmaster, Krull, The Life of Brian. There is a Life of Brian Josh Kirby
I've
poster
seen
out
that
there
one, I think,
somewhere.
yeah.
Oh, I'm going to slip that in for you on the video if I can find it.
I
Um,
might be misremembering it, but like I can picture I can picture a Monty Python poster in that style, but hopefully I haven't imagined it. If not, we just cut this out. It's fine.
um, he made his real name making book covers and worked with a lot Asimov, um, Stephen Briggs, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Alfred Hitchcock, Ian Fleming. Oh, he had the cover for the first pan paperback of Moonraker.
Wow,
Josh Kirby created James Bond. How about
that's
that?
cool. That is cool.
Ursula Le Guin, Robert Rankin, Jules Verne, H.G. Wells. So one of the writers he worked with a lot and had a lot of admiration for was Ray Bradbury.
Wow.
He illustrated three of Bradbury's books, and in fact, on two of them, The Illustrated Man and Fahrenheit 451, they put them out with Corgi commissioned them with Kirby covers, and then second commission with Kirby covers. So there's multiple covers by Kirby on those
No way.
Bradbury books. Um, and there's sort of talking, we've mentioned religion and narrative. He did a little bit of work for L. Ron Hubbard,
Ah,
some of
well,
his peak Scientology books. Definitely not a Scientologist himself.
does sound
Um,
like he was moving in that world. I mean, those were like real titans of the kind of genres in those days, I guess. So like it kind of makes sense for like L. Ron Hubbard to be in the mix there, I suppose.
prior to Discworld in the 70s, the religion thing came again. He was approached by people who wanted to make a science fiction version of the Christian story. And they initially gave Josh Kirby free hand to pursue the Eye Guy series. And he created a portfolio, and then they came back to Kirby and they said, "Would you write this series for us?" Um, the
They asked him to write it, did you say?
they
Sorry?
asked him to write it. Yes.
Interesting. And he's
Um,
like not having written, I guess, what, nothing by this point, or
as far as I'm aware, apparently it was pretentious rubbish. Um, says a known academic. It featured the Image people, an anagram of Magi, and a crucifixion of a savior spaceman called Jesus.
brilliant, love it. I mean, yeah, that's what. To be fair, like if a bunch of crazy Christians give me some money to just like churn out a space version of the New Testament, you're not gonna actually you're gonna put any effort into it, really, are you? You know, you're just
I
gonna take the
mention it
money and
because
turn out.
Josh became pretty obsessed with it, and it was an 81 collection of Voyage of the Eye Guy. But I wonder if working with Terry wasn't his chance to sort of absolve himself or to work out some issues, given the the similarities in that. There's a big world building thing that is tackling these themes, and I mean it's a pretty much direct road through to Eric, which is
Yeah, good point. Yeah, really good point.
just another quick sort of bit on biography. We really should get it straight into the book. Um,
It's a short book, so let's just,
Short
give
book,
us
yeah.
as much as you want.
Quote from Terry at the start here: "I conceived Discworld. Josh Kirby created it."
I think that's far too generous,
It was a
personally.
bit too generous, yeah.
Yeah.
But they also argued, and there's another quote from Terry about what Josh would say when they did. Um, I'll do the pictures, you do the words.
Yeah. Like, well, I mean, the words come first, don't they? I mean, I would say that I'm biased, obviously. Well, we both probably are. Well, you write and draw, I just write, so I'm definitely biased, but yeah.
I am just a writer who draws. I'm just modeling through. There is so there is some biographical detail that's really interesting about how Josh Kirby worked, and he lived in from 1965 until his death in I think 2001. Yeah,
Mm,
he lived in a 400-year-old Tudor rectory in a
of
tiny
course.
Norfolk village of the Shelfhanger. The building was, his website says, a rambling, Narnia-like place filled with books, papers, and paintings. He worked in a cramped old butler's pantry, no bigger than a cupboard. He almost always got requests for the original cover art, but refused to give any of it away. Um, and says he worked slowly and meticulously, 48 weeks to complete a single painting, including reading each novel. Though we know he didn't do that initially. You've mentioned that before.
I no, I did read that, or I think I heard it, I saw it discussed possibly on Reddit or something like that. But I mean, there are discrepancies, certainly. Like we discussed some of them in the
Hmm.
early novels in terms of just like details just not being correct on the covers, but whether that's from not reading the novels or whether that's from artistic license on his part, I wouldn't can say for sure, obviously.
We have had a few tales so far. In the Color of Magic, if you look on the cover, Two Flower has actually got four eyes, which Terry says early in the book he had four eyes, but then it's later revealed
He's just got
spectacles
glasses on. Yeah.
because nobody else on the disc was wearing spectacles. Another one was Granny Weatherwax. He had drawn her with warts,
Oh yeah.
but Terry pointed out that Granny felt inferior because she didn't have any warts,
That's right.
which
Yeah.
is we're supposed to have them. And there was one novel where a major plot point was given away on the cover, and it had to be completely redrawn. And I don't even think I should bring that up in case it's about something else. Um,
I'll be interested. Yeah, keep that one in your back pocket for when we
yeah.
get to it because I'll be interested to know what that is. Yeah, I think like the granny one you could forgive potentially as artistic license, but the two flower one feels like he's just skimmed the first chapter and started started painting, doesn't it?
I don't know if I mean I kind of would. It's book one, I'd forgive the mistake if Terry has literally said in his text she didn't feel like a real witch because she didn't have warts. And yeah, you go with that. Um, I mean, I imagine we've got a few Discworld hardcores here who know these things, but Terry adored Josh, adored his work. Even though they did argue often about the work, and by the same token, I mean, Kirby kept making the covers. He would discuss the art concept over the phone with Terry rather than the art editor or the publisher.
Hmm.
Though he'd send them a rough sketch for approval, it was always Terry he went to first in trying to figure out things.
Yeah, I think you get that, don't you? Like it just shows some care. Like if you're in a kind of artistic relationship with somebody, like if there's no passion to it, like if people aren't invested, like if the writer and the artist aren't invested in their creations and then they're not going to be good. The final product is going to be kind of pedestrian, and regardless of whether you or dislike Kirby's style, like it's anything but pedestrian. It's like it's such a big swing for defenses every single time, and in Eric on every single page, that I think you have to respect that regardless of whether it fits your personal tastes or not.
Right? I mean, 48 weeks. So to complete a single painting. Now, I think there is, I'm right in saying there's maybe 11 or 14 in Eric. So this would have been a full, I don't know, half a year's work for Kirby, maybe longer.
And we know and Terry was like churning out the books at that stage. It probably took Kirby longer to do his contribution than it took Terry.
15 illustrations, I'm told. So yeah, and I mean they're just like I said, this is just such a vital addition. I might even give you this after. I mean, look at this. I mean, I was showing this when I got it.
Oh, yeah.
I remember opening this and thinking, oh right, it's a secondhand copy. Somebody has written their name and address on it, but it's actually Eric's name and address in
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
says 13 Middle Lane, Pseudopolis, still planes, the Discworld on top of Great Atu in the universe, space, near more space.
I love that. More
And
space.
just look at the type of the font on that.
It looks really real, doesn't it? It's great. And only because it matches the Eric above Faust, you would assume that, like you said, somebody had written it.
And you open with that sort of wonderful pic of Rincewind doing a runner. I mean, Kirby's work is it wants to capture energy. It wants to capture people running about and falling over things. And I mean, that's why it does look very much like grotesque at points.
Mm.
He's really putting the focus on the emotion coming out in people's expressions and in physical language.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if anything, I think probably my biggest criticism over the years has just been that it's overwhelming. So yeah, this exercise has been a bit more, has opened up a bit more of an appreciation,
It
I think, of his
really, it
style for me.
really does need. I mean, this is gallery stuff. It does need to be on a large scale
Yeah.
um, for it to be most effective. And I'm actually coming around to your view of the Kirby covers. I think they both short sell Terry and Josh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. But I mean, it's easy to say that now, 2023, when kind of
Yeah.
design tastes and technology and stuff has all
The
changed. They're very of their time for sure.
whippersnappers think we know everything.
Indeed. Well, I guess we might as well jump into it in terms of the
Yeah,
content.
let's go. So the first 30 odd pages, which I've entitled The Bearded Ones.
Yeah.
When a spectre causes havoc in Ankmore Park, the university chancellor summoned death for answers. Rincewind is mistaken for a demon and bound by would-be conqueror Eric Thursley, aged nearly 14. The demon, Vasanago, failed to monitor Eric, and Lord Astrofagal has become quite cross.
Awesome. And also, I was really curious to hear your pronunciation of Astafagal, but
That's
that
a
was exactly what I was thinking as well. And there's something really well done about that, about the demon names in this, where like they all seem at first glance to be unpronounceable, but then there's actually only one sane way to pronounce any of them. So yeah, I thought that was really a nice touch. So Rincewind's back. I mean, I guess we never really expected him to be gone
Hmm.
forever, did we? I guess not. Did we? I don't know. Did you? Or
Oh no, I knew he was coming back. I am kind of curious as to what Terry is going to do with them now. He's gone to the point of bringing back, but that's opening a whole can of worms for you. So you're not to say anything as per rules.
of course.
Um,
It helps that it's the series that I have the least coherent knowledge of as well within Discworld, so like I'm unlikely to spoil it by
so
accident.
you could still be pleasantly surprised on the Rincewind thing, right?
It's starting to come together for me a little bit. So yeah, so as as regular listeners will recall, I hadn't read Sorcery. It's like one of the handful that I hadn't read when we did it for the pod. And I had read this and like looking back on like it's like it carries on from Sorcery's cliffhanger. Like Rincewind is in the dungeon dimensions or wherever he is. So like I can't imagine, and I can't really remember like how I took that context. I know there's a footnote where it's like, you know, Stan Lee style footnote where it's like, see this other book for stuff that happened. I'm like, all right, okay, fine, just keep reading. And I guess that wouldn't have been abnormal for my reading habits back then, where like you I'd have got books that are out of sequence or comic books out of sequence from the library where you just accept that like you don't really know what's going on, but like there's enough cool stuff and enough jokes to hold your interest, so that's fine. So I suspect that that's where I would have been with this. I'm pretty sure I got it from the school library. So I mean, it's not Rincewind's fault. Like I've done it everything to make it hard for him to endear himself to me. Like I've read all his books out of order. Like read half of them when I was a kid.
He's
Again,
running. That's why he's running.
yeah. Well, yeah. We'll get into that. That's definitely part of it.
And I mean, as I really like that as he runs through Ankh-Morpork at the start of this novel, he's peering in every window, and we get one of the characters from one of the previous books, and it's like a little tour of Ankh-Morpork. This specter is running right, and then it turns out to be Rincewind, and the death drops a beat so well.
Yeah.
It's yeah, that was really satisfying.
It's quite a deft intro, and I think we talked about it a lot with Guards, how like his, you know, just his craft is coming along in leaps and bounds at this period in his career, and feels like the world of Ankh-Morpork has is now so well realized after Guards that that's part of why this intro really works, is because he, like you say, he's streaking through the city that feels really alive and vibrant. I love it. Yeah. So just wanted to
We have
pick up
the
on,
Council of Wizardry
yeah, yeah, yeah.
summoning death with the usual rite, and they're a bit of a you get a bit of a resonance from them from the elucidated brethren last time, that Python-esque sort of to and fro of old men who don't have a plan.
Yeah, he found something there because, like, obviously, this isn't the first time we've seen the wizards do the rite of Ask Ashente, or however we're going to say it. But this version does feel a bit more lived in and a bit more self assured. Like, as you say, there's a bit more back and forth, and that does have kind of echoes of the Brethren. So it's interesting to see their evolution. And again, but I don't want to give spoilers or whatever, but like, there's a revolving door. So we're still in this revolving door cast of wizards, which I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say is eventually going to settle down, and you can start to see like the the relationship dynamic, I guess, maybe start to solidify just in this little bit, which is interesting and not something I would have considered at the time, obviously.
There's Astifical. I'll cut that in for our video viewers.
Yeah, that's cool.
This is just yeah, a whole nother level of fantasy painting.
See, green skin though, like I mean, I mean, this is Kirby's book; it's his decision. Green skin, sure, but like for me, like Astifigal, because I read it unillustrated both times, is like when he's not trying to do his like corporate presentation of himself, he's like a bloodthirster basically from Warhammer. So he's red, I guess. So in my head, he's got red skin, but Terry and Kirby decided otherwise. It's their story, so interesting.
I'm gonna thrust this illustrated version on you, PJ.
Yeah,
If
I'm
we
keen
can
to
meet
flick
up
through
for
it
our
actually.
first ever drink
Yeah, we
in
must do
20
that.
years of knowing each other,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you this. And honestly, if you're near a library, if there's a library left in your vicinity, order up yourself a copy of the illustrated Eric, because it was really wonderful. We get Rincewind arriving in the portal in Eric's quarters.
That is cool.
And Eric is initially quite enjoyable, with the fake beard and his mother calling out what's wrong. And
Rincewind's interaction with these young characters as well is quite interesting, and it's something I should have made notes on, but I don't know, the thought maybe even now still hasn't fully formed, but like, yeah, maybe we'll not jump the gun. Let me ruminate on that. I
yeah, I
know
mean,
that,
there's something. And so the back cover described Eric as a demonology hacker. It certainly appears that way. He has pulled Rincewind out of the dungeon dimensions or somewhere close. And we find out towards the end of the book that somebody else has been moving them about. So it kind of leaves it a bit up in the air as to, did Eric really summon Rincewind, or was this other force?
Yeah, or was a part of the scheme. But even I was thinking more just in terms of like, yeah, like my issues with Rincewind as a protagonist, but like he's always at his strongest whenever he is grudgingly trying to save somebody, and that's how he ended up in this situation initially, because he finally decided to do the right thing for a younger character, a young man at the end of Sorcery, and he's now been summoned back from that situation by another young man who also needs help. So yeah, I don't know. I find that interesting in terms of like how we get on board with Rincewind and the fact that he does have a soft spot for these kind of pathetic young dudes is maybe part of it, and maybe that's speaking to the audience a little bit. I don't know, but there's an interesting kind of comparison to be made there.
Do we want to take a quick run through the characters in this first spot?
Go for it.
Your favorite death,
Yes, always.
with his skull buzzing with bees.
Death bees. They come. I think they come back. It's a funny concept. I love it. Got a mate who's a beekeeper now, so
Yeah, so Rincewind and Eric themselves, we've talked about. Eric's parrot annoyed me.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah. What's the name?
Yeah. Uh. Yeah. Don't know. I think it's like it's one of those comedic get out of jail free cards, isn't it? Where like if you're writing comedy and you have that character that you can always rely on to just like say something inappropriate.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to think of a good example.
Is
The only
what's
one
name supposed to be swears?
I think it's like when you can't think of the right swear word, you're like, oh, what's name? You know, like I'm guessing, I don't know, but yeah, it's certainly written as an excuse not to write a bunch of swear words for sure, like from his point of view. But in universe, because it's a parrot, it doesn't have the full vocabulary because it's not a human. I guess is that meant to be maybe what it is?
Yeah, could be that. What I found was the parrot's role in the story as well kept changing, or his dynamic with Eric and Rincewind kept flitting.
Yeah, yeah. It's not. I think it's possibly just because it's a shorter story. It's not as well grounded as it could be for sure, and it does feels like a bit of a comedy button that's not threaded to the right garment. That's a good metaphor. I'm gonna use that again. So yeah, but anybody who gives Rincewind a hard time though gets a little bit of a pass from me always.
And Lord Ostfigel with his office approach to Hades.
Yeah, like I got loads of time for this. Like, for some bizarre reason, like back in the day, even when I first read this, when I was like 13, maybe, like I was into Dilbert. Like, so like I
Yeah.
understood this concept that like, you know, the
We'll put that in our Q&A.
the corporate office world was hell. So that like actually, even though I'd never worked a day in my life, obviously at this point, weirdly made sense to me. I think how did that happen? So right, okay, this is a bit of a divergence, but so I would have had hand me down Calvin and Hobbes books from my older brothers. So Calvin, obviously, Bill
yeah.
Watterson, genius.
Genius.
So in like the early days of the internet, the cartoon syndicates, you know, who put the cartoons in the newspapers, you could go on their website and you could just read them all. And then you would probably know better than I would. Like what I want to say Comics Go-Go or something like that. Like there was a portal that just had all of them, so you could just go online and read all the Calvin and Hobbes, and then it would have all the other big ones. So like I think that's probably how I stumbled across Dilbert. And even though I don't know what I found funny about it, but I just like the idea that like grown-ups were having a really bad time at work while I was having a really bad time at school. I think that's probably what
Some
attracted me
justice
to it.
in that, yeah.
Yeah, even though obviously that didn't bode particularly well for my future at the time.
No.
But
When you realize somebody else is having it as bad as you, Yeah, there's no consolation in that, that you're not alone.
Yeah,
It's just doubly worse.
it should have been, but I don't know. I related to it for some reason, and so yeah. So this was a reference. All the corporate office stuff were references that I shouldn't have got the first time I read it, but I sort of did. So that was interesting.
Dilbert was massive,
Yeah, and
really massive for a while.
it's quite interesting that like
It wasn't funny, but it was massive.
well, when I was like 13, I thought it was funny anyway. But it is interesting that they would have been roughly around the same time. Like Dilbert would have come out late 80s, early 90s when this book was coming out. So it's interesting that there was this kind of idea of sending up that kind of corporate office culture,
Yeah,
obviously kind of in the zeitgeist around that time.
yeah. I think I mean it's important that there was something there reflecting that. Um,
But
yeah,
yeah, it's a shame.
particularly as you've got that move to tech, to computers, to
Yeah.
well, um,
So yeah, that was weirdly interesting to me at a young age for some bizarre reason. Um, yeah, so we made Vastanago here. I'm saying it. Yeah, that's how I'm saying it. Vastanago, and the whole like council is so like the way that hell, I guess, and it is interesting to me that they refer to it, or Terry refers to it as Hades, which feels like a specific round world reference to me because that's like actual the actual name of an actual Greek god, but their Discworld version of hell. So it has so he's the king. So Astifagal is the king, and then Vastanago and a bunch of other big demons there on the council. Is that your understanding? That was sort of my understanding.
yeah.
And Vastanago dropped the ball somehow in terms of letting Eric summon Rincewind. Is that right? That's your yeah.
That's what we believe at this point in the
Yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah.
It's
So
not actually
that's the
proven.
story I was told
Yeah,
at this point of the book. Okay, yeah, because I did, especially in terms of what's to be revealed later. I was thinking back to like how that's all set up, and I was like, I just take his word for it that it works. I don't know what like all the kind of setup of the hell stuff kind of maybe went a little bit over my head. Um, but it gets us off to the races, and that's what's important. So will I do the next one? Will I do the
yep,
next one?
yep. Go for it.
So page 34 onwards to be ruler of the world. Rincewind, Eric, and the luggage journey above the disk and to the jungles of Central Clutch. They are initially welcomed by the Tezumen, but on meeting a condemned explorer, they learn too late their own executions are preordained. Meanwhile, the god Quetzalcoatl is summoned to Astifagal for a disciplinary. Ordered to manifest, he does so just as the luggage disrupts the ritual sacrifice and the death god winds up as a greasy stain. So, yeah, lots to unpack there for like 26 pages or so.
So within that we get the voyage pretty much starts with Rincewind, Eric, and the luggage lifted up above the disc, flying up above over Ankh-Morpork first, then the disc, and already it's kind of, and then you get to Clutch, um, and it's setting it up with that similar sort of riding the dragon thing from one of the first two books.
Yeah.
And so you get the sense that you're on this journey, and this is kind of the book falling down for me quite early because it is so reminiscent of those first two books and to an extent pyramids.
Yeah, yeah, I can
Um,
see where it comes
in
from there.
that, and we talked a lot about this in pyramids about how it sets up one story and then goes in a completely different direction. The same thing's happening here.
Yeah, true.
Um, and it's also we talked a little bit about how it what is being set up for Clutch is the old explorers in a stew pot trope with
Yeah,
the ignorant savages who want to sacrifice them to the amusingly titled Quetzalcoatl. So yes, an Aztec god with a bit of an overcoat on.
yeah. It seems that it's like weirdly out of character, I think, for Terry. There's a couple of things, big things wrong with it. As you said, it's like so stereotypical, and a bit reductive in terms of how Mesoamerican culture is portrayed. It's something I didn't actually realize until we just talked about it again just now, that like Central Clutch as Central America, the idea of Clutch, like we've been to Clutch before, Discworld, right? And we would have always assumed Clutch to have been Asia, I think, or like the Middle East plus Asia, like the classical idea of Asia, right? And now that Clutch also includes Central America, it just feels like it's this kind of slightly catch-all term for everything that's foreign, and that doesn't sit particularly well with me. Um, Terry has this famous quote where he said, satire is meant to ridicule power. If you're laughing at people who are hurting, it's not satire, it's bullying. And how obviously Mesoamerican culture has been treated by colonials, for 400 years up till the present day has caused a lot of hurt, and it's been orchestrated by bullies. So it feels kind of slightly opposed to Terry's values. And that just leaves it kind of just doesn't sit right with me, I guess, the whole sequence, for that reason, probably primarily,
Yeah.
But it's mercifully brief.
It is.
It's
It
20
is.
pages.
I did have before I came on today, I had a reread of this section specifically to see if I was being a bit unfair to it. And I don't think so. I mean, there's some beautiful descriptive language, some amusing stuff in setup and describing the forestry and the lushness of it.
And Ponce de Quirm, like, let's have as much fun as we want with Ponce de Quirm, with the colonial character, because that's, as per Terry's own definition, like that's where the satire should always be directed, So, and the reveal of how he ends up, he's this dude, he's on the search for the Fountain of Youth, and then the reveal of how he died later on is the payoff is almost worth this, but not quite,
Yeah, I felt Ponce was a bit too flowery as well. We've seen this sort of character before, and yeah, more derivative. I did like the sort of the last bit about this. That well, I mean, before we even get to the last bit, we've got Asphagal summoning Quetzalcoatl to give him a good ticking off, and to arranging that he has to go out and apologize to people and tell them that things are going to be different, and that was all kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, all the Asphagal stuff and his relationship to this setting it's probably its greatest redeeming quality. And then when he does manifest, when Quez over Kotal does manifest as this like little itsy tiny little guy.
And actually, Asphagal's making some of the same hard criticism you just made.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, so like there's
all hail Asphagal.
Yeah, I mean, he's a corporate leader. He deserves respect, obviously.
Praise Asphagal.
That's a fair point, and there maybe is a level of self-awareness within this that we're maybe overlooking here, but I think it doesn't necessarily excuse the whole kind of setting of it, the way, because I think it's okay, like, to do classical cultures in a way that feels different, to like take the piss out of the ancient Greek and the ancient Romans. Like there's just no getting around that this feels different, whether it's self-aware or not, I guess,
Yeah, I also like the luggage's entrance, and because it is, well, it's more, it feels more to be like a long short story than it does a novella.
Yeah.
Within that, you've got, this big, manifestation of a god who actually turns up pretty small, and then it's just a greasy stain on the top of the pyramids.
I mean, we've sort of talked about previously, I guess, in sorcery, about how overpowered the luggage is as a character, if we can call it that. I suppose we can. And Terry's solution to that problem has just been to lean into it, which is great, actually. I mean, why not? Need your bed, lie in it. So the fact that the luggage is basically just like an angry TARDIS, in this story is quite fun, where it's just like burning a hole through space and time in its righteous indignation is funny in a way that I felt like they were always trying to keep it distracted or just off scene in sorcery just so that it wouldn't break the story. I feel like he's kind of realized or he's found how to write that. Uh, and yeah, and having him come up doing like a literal reverse Deus Ex Machina where he squishes a god at the end of the sequence. It's quite fun.
So, to meet the most beautiful woman in all history.
Still a bit problematic. Continue.
Thousands of years ago, Eric and Rincewind got caught in the Sortian Wars. They met the Athebian hero, Levelius, and traversed a tunnel under the citadel for the daring rescue of Eleanor of Sort. That didn't go well. On the way out, Rincewind accidentally burned the city to the ground.
Good times. Good times.
So I
Yeah.
think an improvement. I still wasn't a great fan, but I preferred this to the last part. Levelis is quite a fun character.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Rincewind's
forgot.
ancestor. So I mean, but he's like brave and cool rather than running away from things and really cynical.
Well,
So it's kind of like a reverse evolution, and you could almost say.
you could. I mean, definitely in the intervening millennia, is it? I can't remember what the time scale is supposed to be. Definitely, Rincewind has lost something of like Levelis's approach to danger. I think like Levelis is definitely still a coward, but he's like weaponized cowardice to his advantage. Like he doesn't see the point in running away from a problem if the problem's just going to catch up with him. So he's like, right, what's the least dangerous way to solve this problem? Like, how can I get out of this situation and just resolve it for good, hopefully without dying? So I love that, like, that ingenuity is like, it's more applied in terms of how he approaches problems, whereas Rincewind just books it every time, just runs. Yeah, good times with Levelist. Definitely one of the high points of
I'm
this
just going to
book
show
for me.
this off for
Oh yeah, let's see
there's
the
a wonderful Josh
illustration.
Kirby illustration here with the Troy of sorts, and it's kind of I don't know if you can make that out. It's kind of looking backwards.
Yeah,
And Eric and Rincewind are like looking out of its butt.
the hindquarters
Um,
are on full display. Yeah,
so he's taking a bit of license with that, but it really pays off.
facial expression on the horse is good.
Um, yeah, this was a step up for me from the last section. Um,
It is, and I'm glad. Like, I mean, the portrayal of Eleanor is a bit, meh, but like we don't dwell on it at least in the way that we did with all the kind of Mesoamerican stuff.
yeah,
But
you've it kind of is flawed in a sort of different way. I mean, but because you have the central conceit behind it that well, no, she's not really kidnapped, not really, because she likes it where she is and she's happy enough to stay there. She's settled, so it's it's challenging this masculine narrative of coming in and saving the damsel. Well, the damsel doesn't want to be saved. Leave her alone.
yeah, that's true. I mean, that is
Well,
the
it would
flip
be
side
nice
of
if
it.
she wrote a
Yeah,
postcard.
yeah. But even like there is still something I feel slightly off about. Oh, it's the most beautiful woman in all of history, and then when they turn up, Eric is like he's like ooh, he's like repulsed by her. It's like oh, that's not cool. No, there is just that thing where like
Yeah, there's a
the
judgment there. It does hide behind a 14-year-old boy.
yeah he has that perspective and that's okay. But like, and we have been making progress in the series in terms of kind of how female characters are portrayed. This felt like slight step back for me, but again, like you say, you have it filtered through the perspective of a 14-year-old boy, so it probably does ring true.
I've just
Because
remembered I've got grapes in the fridge. I was going to bring in and eat on cam.
oh man,
That'd be great.
that
Would
would
be great. I'll have to do that
if
later.
if you want to
Maybe we'll put
pause.
out a special bonus video.
It's just Andy eating grapes. That's that's what the Patreons want to see. That's what they're paying. That's what they're paying the big bucks for.
I get that
Absolutely,
set up right now.
you should. Uh,
You've got the
but
secret tunnel, the cleaning products that she's not using are down in the tunnel.
yeah, the whole Zordian horse scenario, I love. Actually, I really love. Um, and it still amazes me to this day, like how much of my Key Stage 3 education is wrapped up in this book. And like, I probably had only been aware of the Iliad for like maybe at most a year, literally at most, before I read this book. So it felt all kind of like, oh, cool. This is like a really funny take of this like boring, dusty thing I had to learn about in classics. And it especially blew my mind that like it's so obvious to Terry that the horse works better as a red herring. Like obviously, if there's a big ass horse outside the gates and the army is no longer there, the army is inside the horse, goes without saying. So you have to use that as a bluff. And just that little like slight angle on things, that like slightly different, that slight shift in perspective on these things that we take for granted when we read history or we read myth, is just what makes Discworld for me. So this is one of the first really solid examples of that I remember reading, back
Do you
in the day.
think that's it? It's that I mean we're gonna talk about this later, but that when in classical biblical stories or myth and there's very obviously stated facts and we accept them and they don't make sense, and this is maybe like where Discworld exists in that same place, in comics where there's a panel A, panel B, but in between there's this Discworld is this manipulating of the expected narrative, and
Yes.
it's
Oh,
having
absolutely.
fun. It's the mischief, the Loki of things,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
the
Like
Loki
as you
of
say,
literature.
yeah, something in that for sure. Like this idea that because Homer said it or Herodotus said it, that like that's what happened, and then you go, actually, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, wouldn't it be funnier if this happened? Or like, surely if you were there, if you put yourself in that position, that's not what would have happened. Because if you saw a big horse outside your city and where there used to be a big army, you'd be like, I'm not taking that horse in. I'm just gonna set fire to that horse. Like that horse has got fucking soldiers in it, obviously. So like the yeah, just challenging those like those stories that are so well worn that you never question them. So just that act of questioning is just opens up so much. And like I mean, still so much of the content we consume now is self-aware, but for me back then, reading something like that as a young teenager was just mind-blowing.
Right. And I know we get Rincewind interfering with history and setting the city on fire. Um, like what do you expect when you leave all those cleaning products and like oils and stuff lying about?
Actually, I
Somebody's
wouldn't
gonna
have
start a fire.
health and safety, mate.
Health and safety.
Yeah.
Has to be done. Nobody wants to do it, but PJ and I are here to do it.
Sorry, just before we leave Levelus, actually, the um the thing I bring up pretty much every month, like the pipe that's being laid for future stories and the time travel stuff in this, without giving too much away. And some of the yeah, he's leading in for those who can't see. Andrew is
Hmm.
very, very much leading in. He's a time travel fan,
What?
indeed. So some of those light touch concepts that are being laid in terms of like cause and effect, how much they can tell Lavalus about what they know about his future, that's all gonna come back. Well, those concepts are certainly gonna come back in a big way, and we're gonna get a lot more time travel kind of down the line. But I'll say no more. That's it.
Interesting.
He physically couldn't get any closer to the camera, listeners. So yeah, so that was an interesting kind of retread, like remembering that the time travel elements of this were kind of the origin for some of those later stories. So I'll leave it at that.
Right. I look forward to that. Do you want to take us through the last of Eric's three wishes?
Yes. So page 90 to 100-ish, to live forever. Astifigal journeys to the end of the universe and meets Death, who prepares for the coming paperclips. In the beginning, Eric meets the creator with Rincewind, the chicken, and an egg cress sandwich.
I
I
agonized over how to phrase chicken and egg sandwich, but
prepares for the coming paperclip. So like that, when I read that out loud, like that's a good pun. Like it's a really good pun in terms of like paperclips
so
apocalypse.
what
Like
was that referencing that paper clips were one of the first objects created after out of the Big Bang
yeah.
right theory?
So my understanding of this theory is that instead of a big bang, all the things that routinely go missing from other universes form the matter that then kicks off the creation of a new universe. Please do write in and tell me if we're wrong or if I'm wrong about this. Andy's not committing either way, quite sensibly. But that was my reading of it. Because like, if you've got the book in front of you there, because what else is it?
I
There's a
have a
paper.
wonderful Josh Kirby thing, concept of creation.
That's pretty
Just make
spectacular,
out the
actually.
paperclip launching there.
Class.
It was. I actually read this about 6 weeks ago.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, sorry, I was much delayed getting to this.
sneaky dig. I honestly couldn't wait. I think it might have even been the night we recorded Guards, and I just picked this up. And I've never done that before,
Totally fair.
except for when I started Guards.
But if
Um,
you have the page there, that there's the paperclip and then a couple of other things kind of like pop into existence. I think that was kind of the conceit, was that they were all things that have been lost, or they feel like lost items or whatever. But I could be wrong.
this section's only 10 pages.
Well, yeah, fair point. And by the creator, like, it sort of reminded me a little bit of, there's some leftover gags maybe from Strata or something like that, in terms of like, and maybe a little bit from Pyramids too, like that kind of blue collar tradesman kind of vernacular about like, oh, it's more than my job's worth, not building the universe correctly, essentially.
I have
Oh,
some paper clips here, thanks to ChrisJonesWriting.com.
oh yeah.
Raw matter is continually flowing into the universe in fairly developed forms, popping into existence normally in ashtrays, vases, and glove compartments. It chooses its shape to allay suspicion, and common manifestations are paper clips, the pins out of shirt packaging, the little keys for central heating radiators, marbles, bits of crayon, mysterious sections of herb chopping devices, and old Kate Bush albums.
Yeah, so it's the
Um,
opposite, sorry, of what I
so
said. It's
raw
not,
matter continually flowing into the universe in fully developed forms.
yeah, so it's not the things that you routinely lose, it's the things that you routinely find, but you don't know how they got there. That's so yeah, so that's matter like seeping its way into the universe in a way that avoids suspicion, because you find a radiator key, but you never bought a radiator key. Like, nobody has.
I bought a radiator key. Do you
How
know
much is
I bought? It was £3. I
what?
had to order it online, and I had two, for about a week, and I've lost the second one. And I
It's
actually
disappeared
gave
into a
mine to my
different
neighbor
universe.
because he had lost his. And I told him, "Don't worry, I've got a spare." I have no idea where it is. I have no idea if I have a radiator key or not. Maybe
Yeah,
because I've reduced the probability from 2 to 1.
you
Maybe
see, you've
it'd
upset the
be 1 to
balance.
1.
I think
But
you upset the balance by purchasing one in the first place. You just had to wait for one to manifest. That was the obvious solution there.
the unseen university will be looking to bind me as we speak.
Indeed. But yeah, so sorry, yeah, so I got I got that backwards. But I I like that Kate Bush albums are on that list, which kind of dates it, obviously. Like, everybody just has a Kate Bush album that they don't remember buying. That's very 80s, I think.
There's another quote here I notice: if you want to live forever, you have to start at the beginning.
Again, a
Um,
bit like the horse, that's just like such an obvious in retrospect concept. And it's a bit, it's a good kind of monkey paw kind of wish, where like you want to live forever, so that means you have to go back to the start. Yeah, I remember that being quite mind blowing at the time. Like, being like, well, yeah, that's the letter of the law in terms of what you wished. So
you got the call on that famous Jesus poem,
oh
Footprints,
yeah.
when Asphodel finds footprints in sand from Rincewind and I was going to say Two Floor, Eric,
Oh, poor two
um,
floor.
and the magic circle in the sand, which I didn't realize until I said it out loud an hour ago, that um, circle in the sand, go round and round. Was that Belinda Carlisle's song from the late 80s?
See, all the musical references are flowing thick and fast in this one. It's
Let's
interesting.
just stick with Kate Bush if we can.
I mean, I'm open to all that, like heavy 80s cheese, to be honest.
So this is where I brought up the Rincewind coin analogy. So we've got this obvious subtext by inversion. Rincewind died. saving a sorcerer boy by intent. Now he's alive, saving a sorcerer boy who wants to be a sorcerer, or saving a boy who wants to be a sorcerer and is there by accident. Rincewind is the unlikely representation of a teacher of cautionary tales. Both he and Eric are generally submissive to the events around him.
Yeah, sorry, I butchered that a bit earlier. You pointed it out much more.
Yeah, I was quite eloquent there, I think. Yeah.
You were indeed very eloquent.
Like my tweets, if you agree.
Yeah, as well I should.
It's
So
kind of a complex. I find it complex to sort of extend beyond that, because it is quite. It's yeah. There's this looks intentional to me. Terry's been
it can't be.
doing
It has
science.
to be. I would agree. But it's really difficult to unpack.
Yeah.
You know, and like you say, I think part of why it is quite hard to unpack is that something you've picked up on there is that Rincewind and Eric remain like really reactive protagonists. So like they're not well, Rincewind has never been master of his own story, I guess, and it's annoying me that I can't remember the name of the kid from Sorcery. I've been dancing around it the whole
Coined.
recording. Coined. So that moment in Sorcery where he decides basically to sacrifice himself to save Coin is like this big moment where Rincewind finds agency and makes a decision and does something to his own detriment, but then that's been retconned almost as immediately. And that when we never thought he was dead, like we didn't see him die. He was trapped in the dungeon dimensions, and it was always left open as to what could happen. So to place him then in a new story, yeah, with another young male character, like you say, who's also a sorcerer or an aspiring sorcerer, but he's kind of again back to being his submissive self, like he's not in control of these events, feels like a bit like a step back for Rincewind to me. But I'm overthinking it because like that's literally my job,
Well,
is to
yeah, it
overthink
is. It
stories.
is.
But
I totally agree. It is a hard one to unpack. I mean, if Rincewind is what is Rincewind teaching here? But run away, don't get involved. Just keep your head down. Um, they're not great life lessons, although they serve a lot of people very well. And maybe you can take different readings from it. You can read that Eric is perhaps trying to enable Rincewind by his riskiness, his boldness, in a much less toxic way than Coin could have affected him. I don't know that we actually have the proof for that, because as I said, that they are both generally submissive to the events that are happening.
we don't spend enough time in this story either.
Hmm.
Such a short story and so much happens in it that we don't spend a lot of time on character stuff in the way that we might have done with say Vimes. But like, yeah, that idea of Eric as, and I like that actually Eric is a bit more like the elucidated brethren, and that like the kind of the silly artifice of civilian magic
Yeah.
as opposed to wizard magic is again kind of on display here, and that does make him a lot more relatable. But like, it's Rincewind's place and all that definitely leaves me a little bit unsettled, makes my script editor brain a bit itchy. Like I've mentioned it so many times before that my issue with Rincewind is just that he's a reactive protagonist, and it's just anathema to everything that I know about story as a screenwriter. But like, obviously there is room for it in prose, and especially in comedy prose, and that's the world that we're in. So yeah, the reveal that's about to come, the reveal that we're about to discuss, does make sense, but it just makes it Rincewind once again just feel like a passenger in his own story.
So is this my turn to talk about this?
Very much so.
Rincewind and Eric go to hell.
Yeah.
Bogus man. Encounters with demons such as Ergolfloga reveal a policy of imagination for torture and bureaucratic nightmares. Old friends reunite. The luggage facilitates an escape. Astfigel finds his power challenged by Vasanago, in a manner of speaking.
Yeah, three demon names in one blurb seems unfair, but then you did write it, so oh man,
So yeah, Vasanago, he's been pulling the strings all story. He doesn't like Hell's Open Plan Office idea.
seems fair.
He's a lot of fun on tearing down these policy reviews and consultative documents, sustainability working plan rollouts. Like I've read everybody I think that's read policy documents has read too many policy documents. They feel
If
right.
you've read one, you've read too many. Absolutely. If you've read the appendices, then you're past the point of no return.
So someone needs to rein that stuff in, and Vasanago's a man, the demon, to do it.
Indeed.
I think we
Yeah.
can all thank him for that.
Reminds me of The Good Place. Did you watch The Good Place?
Oh yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, great show. So this is I'm picturing with Fasanago, I'm picturing Ted Danson a little bit, I think. You know.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
spoilers to anybody who hasn't watched
Yeah,
past the end of the
yeah.
first season of The Good Place.
You know, if you've not seen The Good Place, it's kind of it's as well as a comedy, it's a novel for television, best
Yes.
definition of it, and there's many twists and turns, and it has a lot of textual stuff in it. A lot of references to literature, particularly philosophy. I highly recommend it. Highly
Great show,
recommend
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Sitcom about the afterlife with Ted Danson. I mean, how could you go wrong there? And it's got like Pratchett-y vibes, but maybe in more of like a Good Omens Pratchett-y vibe rather than like a straight Discworld Pratchett-y vibe, but there's definitely overlap for sure. So yeah, that's what I'm picturing when I'm picturing all this stuff. In terms of the policy documents and the open plan office, I'm picturing The Good Place big time.
I don't know if we so much need we need to see the return of Quirm de Ponce and um, the other characters from this story that just pop into hell. We
I
do
th-
get a
oh man.
fantastic resolution through the luggage. This character escape plot, which I think is one of when you talked a bit about the luggage being this TARDIS type unstoppable force. The luggage in a sort of a whale. What's the Satanist term for these whales? Um, I don't know. My gerbils, my new gerbils, try and Abbott won't use their whale. I guess
Uh,
it's one of those sort of whales, but in a sort of
That's how I'm picturing it. Yeah, of
version.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, but to have the luggage just break this satanic whale by the sheer force of feet running as fast as they can and rolling out of hell that way is a perfect yeah way to sort of break out this sort of deep stakes climax. I think this part of the book really sits so well with the first part
Hmm.
as back on story completely, although
Yeah.
the last section with the universes and paper clips and all that was a nice, it still felt on theme too.
It builds. Yeah, like I think broadly speaking, this book gets better as it goes.
Yeah.
I like the callbacks because like my rigid screenwriting brain likes structure. So like if something's set up, it has to be paid off. So I like that Ponce de Quirm gets paid off, and I like that the luggage eventually reaches its destination. And the idea of the luggage in a demonic hamster wheel is funny. It's a good visual. So yeah, so that all that pretty much works for me in a way that sort of certain elements maybe of the first half of this book kind of don't. And I think the Vasanago reveal, like it's not as good as the guards reveal, in terms of a twist, but it fits. And because we're on a kind of shorter time scale here in terms of the length of this novel, and it's not it's not this complex mystery like in the way it's not a mystery that's designed to be solved by an investigator in the way that guards kind of is. So like So yeah, I think it's pulled off pretty well, and especially the final set piece of Astafagil's promotion into irrelevance, like that's kind of the cherry on top, isn't it?
Yeah. Just on the whale thing before we leave that, I mean, that's one of Kirby's pieces where he brings that animation type expressions to it, and everybody jammed in together and just puffing it. You know, this wheel is completely off its tracks. There's also a double page spread for Asphodel when he gets his promotion
Oh,
and
nice.
is surrounded by demons with brightly colored balloons, all turned out to celebrate. Um, his Vasanago's toppling of Astfagel is there's a mouthful. Vasanago's toppling of Astfagel through promotion is just yeah, beautiful.
Got it.
Really,
Yeah.
really mindful.
All the descent into hell stuff as well. Like that was probably one of the gaps in my classical education at the time. Like I don't think I would have been aware of the Orpheus and Eurydice story, but I've since been to see Hadestown off Broadway, and I get it all now. So
What
some
is
of
Hades Town? Is that a musical?
it's a musical about the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Yeah,
Ah,
it's very good. Highly recommend. If you can find the original cast recording, I'm on there clapping and cheering in the
oh
background.
wow.
We were there for the original cast recording, but it's since moved to Broadway and it's become a much bigger show. And
Neil Gaiman did a riff of this in I think it's called The Song of Orpheus, one of the Sandman books.
oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Um, Sandman special one, I believe. So yeah.
You would love Hadestown, man. You should check that out, or at least grab the soundtrack. I think it is coming to Europe. I don't, or maybe it's already been and gone. I'm not sure. It's a great play though. So yeah, every bit of extra classical knowledge that I've gleaned in the intervening 25 years was then put to use on this reread. So that was good. Um, yeah, so that sort of brings us quite neatly to the end. And well, I mean, Rincewind arrives back on disc. That's the real kind of payoff for this book, I guess. You know,
It's
he's
back.
at large again. Yeah. How do we feel? How do you feel? I knew it was coming, obviously, but
Yeah, I'm kind of yeah, I'm kind of curious. Yeah, I do have a sort of a I think it's the psychological imprinting thing. Wristwind was there in the first book. I'm Two Flower. He and you are my guides. So yeah, I'm not quite giving up on Rincewind yet.
it is.
And this was an enjoyable cape. He did okay. He didn't quite scale the level half brick in a sock, but it was okay.
It's gonna be hard to beat. Yeah. And if I was being really harsh, like if you were being a super harsh critic, you would be like, oh yeah, I mean, Rincewind made this great noble sacrifice at the end of sorcery and found his agency and saved a child from certain doom. So like to then bring him back to life is undercuts all that, but like that's just not the genre that we're in.
But
It's
does
not.
it? But does it? People often say that about death in fiction, but does
Yeah,
it?
I don't know. I
Does it
think
really?
in the world and the genre that we're in, I think it's okay. And there's like if every single X-Man and every single Avenger and every single member of the Justice League can come back from
Well,
death after
no,
saving the
those
universe.
guys die too often. You don't get a lot of deaths and resurrections in the disc.
So far,
So far.
no, that's I'm throwing out red herrings here, obviously. Um, so
If if you were throwing out truths and trying to conceal them, you would say they were red herrings, wouldn't you?
indeed, it's um, it's turtles all the way down. So yeah, I mean, obviously, after however many, it was what, 4 books or whatever when we lost Rincewind, like there was no way. Like we knew even just from context of like 52 disc or sorry, 42 Discworld books that that wasn't going to be the end of Rincewind. So I don't think anybody was seriously expecting his sacrifice at the end of Sorcery to be the ultimate sacrifice. So it doesn't feel like cheap. Certainly not to be sitting reading it here in 2023. It doesn't feel cheap. Maybe if you were reading it in 1990, it might have felt different. Um, but no, I was yeah, it was good to kind of put that puzzle together, you know, to read sorcery and Eric in the right order and kind of see how that story all fits together properly. And yeah, I was broadly speaking, I was satisfied by it.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly not bad. Certainly not bad. I think when taken as a package with Josh Kirby's art, um, yeah, makes it a good experience, and it's short enough to go back and reread. If I'm wrong, I can go find out by myself.
Mm. Quotes? Have we done quotes yet? Or bright spots or any of that kind of formatty stuff that we usually do around this time?
And a couple of quotes here. It's funny how the people have always respected the kind of commander who comes up with strategies like, I want 50,000 of you chappies to rush at the enemy. Whereas the more thoughtful commanders who say things like, why don't we build a downgrade wooden horse and then nip in at the back gate while they're all round the thing waiting for us to come out? Are considered only one step above common oiks and not the kind of person you'd lend money to. This is because most of the first type of commander are brave men, whereas cards make far better strategies.
Well, this is it. Yeah. Yeah, I preempted this. Like, I guess it's such a bit that I really love, and that quote just sums it up perfectly. I guess, you know, and there's something in that kind of that big shadow over the British psyche, especially of Terry's generation of like the First and Second World Wars, I guess, where just like that sheer futility and loss, where like, well, did we need to kill? Did 50,000 people need to die in that battle or whatever?
Right, if you
So
were working class, you were cannon fodder.
yeah, exactly, and that the idea that there are inventive, interesting ways to save lives essentially in war could have been seen as ungentlemanly or whatever. Uh, can't say exactly why, but I was doing a bit of a deep dive for a job into the wartime SAS and particularly Paddy Main, who's a local man, one of the founders of the wartime SAS and the African campaign during World War II, and the fact that, and he was like a lawyer, like he wasn't some working class dude, he was middle class, but the fact that these guys, they were the kind of Lavelases of their time, and like the kind of the stuffy old officers didn't really like what they were doing or didn't really get into it, and that story about the formation of that unit is really really fascinating. And there's a good drama on BBC iPlayer about it called SAS Rogue Heroes, which is like not in any way really based in fact, but it's very good fun and it's got a lot of good music in it as well. So if you're at all interested in that story, like I bet you didn't think that's where that was going when we were talking about the Trojan War, but yeah, from the Trojans, jump over 300 and all those kind of crappy movies. Go watch something about Paddy Main in the SAS instead.
I'll go with my second quote too.
Yep, please do.
Asphodel had achieved in hell a particularly high brand of boredom, which is like the boredom you get, which is A, costing you money, and B, which is taking place while you should be having a nice time.
Devastating, absolute devastating indictment of just like what it is to have a job as an adult, right? And like, as with Dilbert, like that's exactly the sort of thing that put me off ever having an office job, and like I never really have had a proper office job ever, so it kind of worked out. Well, maybe you know, sometimes it feels like it didn't, but in the in the grand
Yeah,
sense of things, I'm glad.
but you're a writer, PJ, so you know you've got a desk job. You're a desk.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have to wear a tie, and well, I have I had to read the occasional policy document, especially when I worked at the BBC. But like, I don't begrudge them that stuff too much because I still got to do fun things as well, so shouldn't complain.
Do you want to give us your
Absolutely.
quotes?
So my quote is also Zordian horse related, but it's a lot shorter. It's a lot more compact, and it's just this. There's a door. Where does it go? Stays where it is, I think. I just laughing now, right? I have no idea why, right? But I vividly remember laughing out loud when I first read that. Like when I was reading this book, I was like, "Have I read this? Have I definitely read this?" And I got to that line, and I laughed out loud, and it's like, "Yeah, I've read this." Um, I'm still laughing. It's so silly, right? And it's apropos of literally nothing in terms of the story. Like it's a complete throwaway gag, but the wordplay is just so simple yet so unexpected. Like there's no finer example, I think, of Terry's skill in like such a small number of words. It's a gag that like I don't think it would work on screen because like if it was delivered in dialogue, like you'd have moved on before like the penny would have dropped. You know, it's not an obvious punchline. The penny has to drop it like, oh yeah, doors don't physically move, and that's why it's funny. But you know, you'd be on to the next line by the time that would register with an audience. So I think it's like a really good example of how his sense of humor is so well crafted and so well suited for the prose medium, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I
And
think
it's 4 lines, and like I don't know how many times I've read it. Actually, well, I've probably only read it 4 or 5 times, but it makes me laugh every time.
I mean, if you go and watch Stephen Moffat's Press Gang series, his first series with his first commissioned 43 episodes,
That's right, yeah.
which is classic British television. And
Yes.
he did this quite a lot, very short lines. And actually, there's a famous sibling line to this from a feature film. And I think it's the best line in the film. It's from Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah.
Where do these stairs go? They
They
go
go
up.
up. Yeah. Yeah, and in a way, this is funnier though, I think. And I love Ghostbusters. I mean, Ghostbusters is one of my favorite films, top 10 film easily. But like this is definitely funnier because stairs do go up, but doors don't move. And that's why
Stage
I
door.
think and I think that's why it's funnier. But anyway, yeah, it's been a while since I sat and dissected a single joke over the course of an evening, but
Yeah, because
I'll leave it at
it's you
that.
know you think of a door as a junction, but it subverts that because it
Yeah,
just
because you don't go, the door doesn't go anywhere, you go somewhere, which is like,
right.
that feels like some Matrixy stuff right there. Um, yeah, I don't know. Well, it's nerdy. It's a kind of it's a writer's quote, I guess, but I think it sums up a lot of what makes Terry's humor special.
I was gonna discontinue the going postal section, but then lo and behold, just before we recorded, we got a letter in from our friend Roasty Buns.
Well, we'll do it whenever we have a letter. If we don't have a letter, we don't have to do it.
Yeah.
We're our own bosses. We'll do what we like.
Roasty writes, just got caught up with the podcast, and as always, thanks for taking the time to answer another of my questions. My pleasure. I think you two hitting the nail on the head, and your answer spawned an amazing quote. There are better things to do than give your money to a Nazi. Anyway, here's a lighter hearted question. I was attending a concert the other day, the band's Carcass. Sure cute.
Woo! Love Carcass. Uh, didn't realize they're still touring. Oh man, that really brings me back. Remember when they got back together in kind of 2008 or so. Um, so Andy, if you don't
They're a
know, they're
mutual death or brutal death extreme metal band. Spawned one of the best mosh pits ever, it says. So Roasty writes he was one of the highlights, he was at the bar. There was this guy built like Andre the Giant talking to his mates about Terry Pratchett. And I told him, says Roasty, about the podcast, and he said, check us out. As he loves the idea of getting to see someone's fresh journey through Discworld. Hello. Bye.
cool. Yeah,
Um,
hopefully we have. I don't know how this guy's gonna feel. Like he's tuned into the podcast, and some guys describing him as Andre the Giant
hey,
in a
Andre the Giant
letter.
was pretty cool.
He was very cool. Yeah, hopefully you'll take that in the spirit it was intended. I'll pick it up here, sure. So Roasty writes, he was around my age, mid to late 20s, and it got me thinking, if you had to sum it up, what is it about Terry Pratchett and his creative endeavors that draw people of all ages and walks of life to it? To my knowledge, there hasn't been many mainstream adaptations of his works in years, and yet people continue to stumble upon him. I know people who hate anything fantasy but make an exception for Discworld. So I made some notes on this, but as I reread the question, I realized they're all the wrong notes. So let's hear from Andy first on that.
So obviously I'm still figuring this out as a result of being green. Um, my best guess, best estimate is that it is this sort of jumping around and looking at different characters of different professions in a city type environment. You've got and I don't think your comments do go wrong because you mentioned Python, and there is that sort of strong tradition of British comedy, which is actually quite good. We Brits are quite good at comedy, and also you've got that science fiction, fantasy thing, and what I've found being a member of a lot of SF&F franchise fandoms is that
Mhm.
a lot of the fans are very po-faced. They
Yeah,
take this stuff incredibly seriously. Even Marvel comics, and
yeah. And it's
it's
only
not
getting
meant to
worse.
be taken seriously. That's not why we make this stuff. We make this stuff for play, for fun.
Yeah.
And I think Terry imbues that. Um, in that, he obviously loves wordplay. He loves creating ridiculous situations. And also, I mean, also on that is the domestication aspect, that all these fantastical things going on in his stories are married with down to earth, real life kitchen
Yep.
sink. And I think that is probably the answer as to why people from all different walks of life like Discworld.
Yep, that's it, nailed. I think it's how grounded a lot of the situations are, and it's something that you've been able to tell throughout the months of us doing that, is that I've always been impatient to get to the stories where that's more apparent, like Guards, for example, where it is just like working class perspective in a fantasy world. Like in my head, that's what this world kind of is. So I think that does have a broad appeal beyond people who are in the fantasy. Um, I think it's an interesting question because, like, as I've been kind of revisiting my Discworld journey through this, like growing up, I never would have considered Discworld to be particularly outside the mainstream, but like in terms of like that kind of culture, like I mean, you could go into Virgin Megastore and could buy a Discworld book, but like the other kind of franchises that existed in literature at that time, like your Lord of the Rings or your Marvel comics, they have now since become billion-dollar franchises in a way that Discworld hasn't. But but back then they all kind of seemed on a roughly level playing field, I guess, and that's something that's only kind of changed in the intervening 3 decades. It's a long time. So that was an interesting perspective, I guess. But Discworld, this isn't what Ruthie Buns asked, but like, got to talk about it anyway. Discworld has resisted franchiseification, I think, because of a lot of what we've discussed already, which is like Rincewind as kind of the original protagonist not being particularly proactive, and a lot of Terry's sense of humor working far better on the page than it does on the screen, just in terms of like his turn of phrase or the kind of puns that he uses. It's a difficult proposition for like, yeah, $1 billion franchise, and I kind of like it that way. I kind of prefer it that way, I think.
And you were talking about the British comedic tradition, about you mentioned Dad's Army, Hello Hello,
Yeah, well, I think there's a
Wooster
lot
and
of,
Jeeves.
in terms of like it's easy for me to criticize, and I'm not really criticizing, saying that like Rincewind is a reactive protagonist, because there is a strong comedic tradition, especially in the British comedic tradition, of these kind of bumbling reactive protagonists, and but they're all very much in that straight comedy world and that sitcom world. And yeah, the examples you give, Hello Hello, Dad's Army, Jeeves and Wooster. But I mean, even going back to the original Woodhouse stories, like Jeeves is the proactive one. He is the protagonist of all the books, but it's only the TV show that it's more of a two-hander. Um, so outside of that kind of, half an hour on a Sunday night on BBC Two, to translate that, because obviously Discworld has trolls and dwarfs and magicians and world-ending apocalypses every other book. Like you can't do that in half an hour on Sunday night on BBC Two. So like, it's making that transition, or that's what makes it hard to make that transition. And we'll talk about the watch hopefully at length down the line, and in terms of why that hasn't really been possible. But I'm so fine with that. I think the adaptations, with maybe the exception of The Color of Magic, like the ones we can't talk about yet because you haven't read the books, like, are relatively successful. And we'll discuss this when we get there. So it's not this impossible task. Like this world can be adapted to the screen, but it's never going to be Lord of the Rings. It's never going to be the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't think, just because of the very specific nature of the sense of humor and how the stories are told.
Cool. Can I just give a wee shout out to a resource we used that I found really interesting? Josh Kirby's artwork was shown at there was a life life gallery, not life gallery. It sounds like Josh Kirby's naked at it.
That's a bit, yeah.
Those life retrospectives. There was one hosted in 2007 in Liverpool.
Oh, wow.
And Peter O'Keefe put together a gallery tour on audio.
Oh.
Now that's no longer there, but if you go to Liverpool museums, and you look for the listing for the out of world tour pod, the out of our world, is that it? The Josh Kirby retrospective, you will find a link to download the podcast, and if you take that page, run it through the Wayback Machine, you'll get a lovely 50-minute audio tutorial on Josh Kirby.
Oh, cool.
Obviously, you won't have the visuals there in front of you, but you can figure some of them out. There's a fair section devoted to Discworld, as you might imagine.
Of course, yeah, very cool. So we've been going and going actually, but this is the only final thing I kind of want to say before I let Andy do the sign-offs is that as we record, it's the 14th of June, 2023, which is the International Day of Action in support of the Writers Guild of America's writer strike. So as a Writers Guild of Great Britain member, I just want to extend my heartfelt solidarity to our striking comrades in the US and wish them a speedy victory in their strike.
Yes, well said, man. Can you tell us anything? I'm a writer too. I'm just not as famous as you. Can you tell us
I have like a
anything
piece of
about?
plastic that says my name on it. That's as famous as I am. Sorry, what was the question?
Well, I was going to say actually, just on the way to the question, I have been a member of the Society of Authors, and they do some fantastic work, as well as the people that collect the money for me.
Oh, ALCS.
What did you say they're called?
ALCS.
ALCS.
Authors Literary.
Yes, Authors Licensing and Collection Society. And if you are an author, please go and register with the ALCS. It costs £30, which you don't pay until after the ALCS has collected it for you. So that's a win right there. And they will go about, they would chase up what you've written if you tell them what you've written, where it is. And every year I get I get some cash. We get 100 or so.
I got £40 this year.
40 flip.
So there you go.
It makes a difference, you know.
It absolutely, yeah.
You don't have to work to earn it. They do all the work. It's fantastic.
Well, you did work, you did earn it, so you better get it. Yeah. So like all those organizations in support of writers, it's a tough job all over the world. So when we're up against it, it's really important that we all stand together. So it's great to see all the different guilds in Ireland and across Europe and the UK standing together in support of the WGA, because the rising tide, I think, raises all ships in terms of how writers can kind of survive in this industry. And it's never been easy, and it's certainly not getting any easier. So these are the only tools we have at our disposal, and solidarity is kind of the main one. So
yeah, I think we should talk about this another time as well as now.
Yeah,
this needs to be kept in the air.
Hopefully the next time we get together, the strike will be resolved. But I'm not going to get my hopes up about that.
Yeah, things are getting tough out there for us creatives.
Indeed,
so we very much appreciate your tuning in today and joining me on my Virgin foray, and PJ on his Learned Old Hand one.
Next we're going to do moving pictures.
We're going to do moving pictures next. I have it down off the shelf.
There it is.
Josh Kirby Corgi edition.
So this is one that I do own, which I think I did actually buy in a Virgin Megastore. So I'll try and lay my hands on it and read the hard copy. Obviously, with everything we've just discussed about screenwriting and all that, and we're going to read a Discworld book about movies. And Andy might struggle to get a word in edgeways next month. I love this book. It had a big impact on what I've done with my life and my career, obviously. So I'm really looking forward to talking about it, and hopefully you guys will join us for that. So
You can
We
search her
keep, we
and
keep,
follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. I don't know, something happened with guards last month. In YouTube, we usually only get like 3 people first week, 20 overall. We had, I think, like 60 in the first week,
oh, nice.
about 110 overall. So whoever's been dropping YouTube links for us, thank you so much.
Cool. Appreciate
Make
that. Yeah.
yourself known if you've or if you've reached us through someone else, point them out to me, and we get some special badge
Yeah.
for them.
We'll do some shout outs at the very least. At the very least.
We're on pretty much every podcast platform. We're also on email at I've never read Discworld at gmail.com. And that's it. Have I ever read Discworld?
I have.
Thanks. Good night.
Goodbye.